Welcome back, and joining me for a closer look at what's played out on the market scene today is Jordan Toy from Legacy Family Wealth. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us in studio, Jordan. Let's start off with the Fed. Already there was action last night. Of course, the central bank keeping rates steady. What was quite interesting is that they've raised their outlook for inflation, and to me there's nothing upbeat about that. But we did see markets rallying after that, and I'm wondering what markets actually saw.
It was quite an odd one, so I do agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, you've got these sort of conflicting messages and hard to read through on why that might be viewed as positive for markets. My take on it is that it also could be, you know, all we've heard for the last 3 weeks is tariffs, 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 and it's been, you know, obviously very volatile and chaotic in markets, I think, to put it lightly. So I think a shift in focus somewhat, and I mean, we heard the re-emergence of the word transitory out of the Federal Reserve, which I thought, I don't know if it was a little ill-advised. But the market clearly, I think, buying into that story that potentially it is transitory and that maybe tariffs are going to sort of have a short-term impact on inflation. Sometimes hard to read why markets move the way they do, but that was our take on that. At least.
I hope that they are not wrong a second time.
I hope so too. I certainly hope so.
All right, well, let's bring it back home and take a look at our own South African Reserve Bank's interest rate decision today. Was it 4 out of the 6 members of the MPC voting for no change, and that's exactly what happened. The SARB really is dealing with quite a fluid situation in terms of the global policy landscape. So they've had to consider a lot, a lot of moving parts on that front. So would you say that because of this kind of uncertainty and chaos, that it's maybe valid that they kept rates unchanged, even though back at home inflation is actually quite low?
Yes, I mean, quite a lot of central bank sort of decisions are today, and it was interesting to see that the commentary out of pretty much all of them and also the interest rate decisions was largely to hold.
Yes.
So obviously we had the Reserve Bank governor talking about it earlier today, no move on that front. Largely also expected, the same as the Fed, I think the same as the Bank of England as well. So all of them are seemingly talking about the uncertainty created by tariffs, right? I think it's an exceptionally difficult environment for them to plan in. As you mentioned, we're seeing inflation, I mean, earlier this week print yet again sort of on the low end.
Yeah.
But the Reserve Bank has been pretty consistent in their messaging that they're expecting inflation to tick up later in the year. They're talking about inflation expectations also rising. So largely expected. We'll see how the future unfolds. I understand the decision to hold at this meeting just because, as they've all mentioned, there is a lot of uncertainty. They don't really know what's going to happen on the tariff front. We know that Trump keeps talking about 2nd of April, and that's going to be quite an important date. Let's see what happens there, but very difficult. I don't envy them to be trying to plan in this kind of space. So, but it's a difficult one, right? We've also we saw the economic growth figure for last year being exceptionally low. So on one hand, yes, we need to control inflation, but the flip side of that is that we need to stimulate growth. So quite a challenging environment for them, I think, but largely an expected move today.
Well, let's go into some company news. Shaftesbury was one of the winners for today. I think earlier on in the session it was up more than 11%. It came out with 2 announcements, actually. One that was saying that we are in advanced discussions with Norgus Investment Bank. And then there's one that came out that said, okay, we have entered into a partnership for our Covent Garden portfolio. What are the markets buying here?
So I did see both of those announcements as well. Obviously, there was clearly maybe some leakage, and they needed to sort of get ahead of it and clearly doing the right thing and making that announcement as soon as possible. So quite a prized asset. I mean, I was looking at the announcement. They're talking about £2.7 billion. So this is a significant asset, real estate asset in a well-known area in London. My main takeaway from it is the sort of, obviously the cash that Shaftesbury is going to receive from this deal. They've talked about using it for a number of things, but the main takeaway for me was the debt reduction. So we're seeing, a significant reduction or rather expected reduction in their loan-to-value ratio, their net debt figures. So that was my main takeaway.
And that's always good for a property company, especially.
Yeah, I think certainly in the property space. I don't think they were overly sort of indebted.
Yes.
But clearly management must have some views on what they plan on doing going forward if they're looking to reduce that debt burden, because there must be a reason to give up a 25% stake in an asset such as that.
quickly, before we go into your stock pick, we have about 2 minutes. Momentum coming out with interim results. Also another winner, I think, was up by about 8% or more. Headline earnings per share climbing 55%. Yeah, it seems like Momentum has actually become one of the favorites in that insurance sector. Justified?
I think so. So it was interesting. I looked a little earlier today, and it was up sort of low single digits, 2, 3, 4%. And when I looked more recently, it's shot up closer to the close. But rightly so. I think we saw normalized headline earnings per share figures strongly up, dividend up, return on equity. So at face value, quite a strong set of interim results. We'll see sort of what the full year looks like. I think, Discovery's obviously been one that's talked about a lot. They're very dominant in that space. Not that Momentum hasn't been, but we're seeing some changes come through there, just sort of anecdotally. Obviously, as wealth managers, we deal with Momentum in certain aspects. So from our side, it's been pleasing to see sort of new systems being rolled out, making it easier for wealth managers to sort of service clients. So pleasing results, and I think the market rewarding them handsomely for it.
All right. Well, what are you looking into in terms of adding to your portfolio, your stock pick for today?
So my stock pick for today is Tencent. It's obviously a stock that most South Africans are familiar with. One of Tencent's Naspers most successful early investments. I see that it was down sort of 3-4% today. They came out with numbers recently, which I thought was pretty decent. It's obviously had quite a strong run in the recent past. What's interesting for me is, it doesn't really need huge explanation, but it's a massive company, right? They're in cloud computing, gaming, just WeChat on its own. That's an app with 1 billion users. So this is a behemoth of a company, and one that's largely been unloved for good reason. But when we contrast it with US tech, there's a big valuation discrepancy. I'm not, I suppose, mentioning anything new here. But for me, one that goes often overlooked. A year ago we were talking about, or most investment professionals were saying, China's uninvestable. There are risks. We know there's risks in investing in China. But I think it's interesting how that dynamic can flip. We have headline news around something like DeepSeek, and then suddenly nobody's saying, we're not hearing the word uninvestable as much anymore. So I think that's something to bear in mind, that when everybody else is looking elsewhere, often there can be opportunity there. There's always risk, and the risks are well known in China, right? We know what happened in the tech sector there. So one to keep an eye on. Yeah, but anything comes with risk, but with risk there's usually opportunity as well.
Exactly, and maybe big reward. Thank you so much for your time, Jordan. That was Jordan Toy from Legacy Family Wealth.